Alright, so in this lesson we're going to go ahead and get ourselves into Substance Painter. It's been a lot of work, and I know you're kind of at this point going, come on already, I want to start painting some cool stuff. Yeah, that's true, but if you don't kind of work through this properly, you're going to have a fun issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to export out the high res and the low res mesh, and then we'll be doing some baking when we get into Substance Painter. A lot of that right now, since this is your first time through the pipeline, are probably going, I don't get it, but don't worry about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take the color code, take these two color code guys. Let's go ahead and group those, and I'm going to go ahead and call those the color code group, like that. And I'm just going to go ahead and move them back. I don't need them in the forefront, like that. And then we're going to go ahead and take the low res group, and we're going to go ahead and zero that out. So I'll take the translation, put the 0, so that we're basically near or close to the origin where we originally had it. So here is the rule of the game when it comes to exporting things out of Maya and into Substance Painter. And it's the reality that it has to do not with meshes as being UV coordinates or separate meshes inside of Substance Painter, but it's all based on material. So for instance, if I were to take this entire material, right click, say assign new material, and it doesn't matter what material I give it. It doesn't have no clue, it could be any material, doesn't matter. So I'll just go ahead and give it a Lambert, right? And it's now called a Lambert 5, right? So I'll just go ahead and rename that, say, group 1, okay? Even though I have different pieces of meshes, I will export this as an FBX file, and it's going to come in as one single mesh to a certain degree. So it sounds kind of weird. Usually you combine the meshes and you make them one mesh. But what I'm going to do is, with this having everything assigned to this specific material, I'm going to go ahead and grab everything here, all these pieces, as you can see, and I'm going to go to File, Export Selection, Option Box. And now, if you don't see the pull down here for FBX, so you can come down here, you can see FBX Export, make sure, I'll go ahead and close this. If you go to Windows Setting Preferences, Plugin Manager, that FBX is turned on. So let's go to FBX here. And it's always fun to find. Let's see here. Where are you? There it is. fbxmaya.mtll. So turn on loaded auto load for future's sake. And if you don't see it on the pull down. So again, I'm going to grab all the geometry. These are separate pieces of geometry, right? And I'm in my object level right here. Not in my group level, but my object level. I'm going to go ahead and grab all these pieces, which are assigned to one specific material. And I'm going to go ahead and do Export Selection Option Box. And I'm going to go ahead and choose FBX. Say Export Selection. Now I want to, before we do that, let me just show you some edit presets. If you go to edit presets here, you'll see a couple options here under geometry here, which are triangulate. You want to triangulate your mesh upon render time. I know it sounds kind of strange, but you definitely want to have that in. And you also want to make sure that you have smoothing groups on. Very important. So again, I'll do this again just in case you missed out on it. I'm going to grab all the meshes, File, Export Selection, Option Box. I'm going to choose FBX, and I'm going to go to Edit Presets. I'm going to make sure under the Geometry tab that Smoothing Groups is on and Actual Triangulate is on. Okay. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and hit Close, and now we're going to say Export Selection. And you can see I'm under my DMA 375 class files, Maya files. I'm going to go up one. And we have our bakes folder. If you can recall our bakes folder, that's where we're going to keep things all nice and organized. So I'll call this the, let's see, the garbage low res LR. Here we go. Oops. Garbage low res. And I'll say Export Selection. And you'll see warning, smoothing groups unsupported. Don't worry about that, just hit Close. Okay, so now we've done that. We're going to go ahead and take this mesh, this group I should say, move it over here. We'll take this group, okay, which is a high-res mesh, and we're going to put that to 0, so we get it back. And you can see this is already assigned to a material, which is the material they were using for UVs, so it is just assigned to one material. Okay, so you can see here, it's this Lambert here. But if you were to take two of these meshes, okay, and to say assign new material, and let's make it a blend, okay, you would actually have two separate pieces of meshes that you can hide on each other, and you could have the UVs actually basically just you know, two different UV sets, so to speak. But it's the same UV layout, the 0 to 1, but it's really two different UV sets. So it's sort of having the need for two separate materials with two separate meshes, which is something you might want to do. So if you wanted to get, say, for some odd reason that this garbage can was going to get knocked over in a simulation in 3D, you would actually go with this workflow and just grab everything and do a file export selection and do a FBX. And what you would get is actually two separate meshes with this, obviously in their UV spaces you know, currently. So for instance, if I go to modeling UV editor, right, and if we take a look at the UVs from the 0 to 1 space for these pieces of geometry, they're here, and then for these pieces, they're over here. So you would get two separate pieces of geometry that you can turn on and off, so that, you know, if you were in Substance Painter, you could turn off this geometry. Here, I'll just delete it and then you can get in here and paint if you had an underside of this actual thing and you wanted to paint under it or something. So that does come in handy, but we're going to keep everything, again, just like we did before. So I'm going to grab everything, right-click, assign new material, and I'll make it another Lambert for the heck of it. Make sure it's just one material, and I'll call that Lambert, you know, high res, whatever. Doesn't matter what it's called. We're going to rename it eventually. So with that, again, I'm going to go and grab all the pieces of geometry in my high res. Again, you can just go to your object level here and grab everything. Make sure you have everything selected. And we're going to go to File, Export Selection, FBX, Edit Presets. Make sure Smoothing Groups is on. Make sure Smooth Mesh is on. Make sure Triangulate is on. And we're going to go ahead and say Save Preset or Close. And export settings, and we're going to go ahead and choose make this garbage high res or garbage underscore HR, like that. And okay, there we go. Okay, so we have the high res and we have the low res, and now we're going to jump into Substance Painter and get to work. So let's go ahead and do that. Welcome to Substance Painter. Here it is. I'm going to show you about my current version of Substance Painter. Now this is you could say it's a relatively new program. It's been out for a while. It's been out for a lot on sort of like a beta version, and they had one big full version that came out. Now they're on their big transition into a yearly basis, which is versions 2017. In this case, I have 0.2.0. So if you have this or higher, you should be good to go. So again, just make sure that you have the latest version of Substance Painter and that you don't have an older version, because they are quickly changing things in here and adding new features as we go through this. Okay, so under Substance Painter, I'm going to go ahead and do a File New. And there's a lot of templates that you can use for what we're going to be creating maps for. And what we're going to be using is PBR Metallic Roughness HQ, or High Quality. So this is physically based shading, in this case just PBR. So we're going to leave this to PBR Metallic Roughness HQ, algorithmic. Okay, so just make sure this is what you have set. The actual mesh itself, mesh selected, this is going to be your low res mesh. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and I'm going to go to my folder itself. And I go to my bakes, and here you can see we have the high res and the low res bake. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the low res bake and hit open. And now you have what's called import mesh normals and baked maps for all the materials and so forth. So here you can see this is where you can import all types of maps and so forth. If you, for instance, were bringing in a low res proxy mesh from such programs as ZBrush or Mudbox, you would bring in your low res obviously here, and then you would bring in the normal map or the displacement map that you had created here, and you would just stick it in here. We're going to talk about helper maps and how we're going to be creating helper maps to help us create specific masks and build out our work. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and leave everything as is. The normal map format is either DirectX or OpenGL. Usually if you go into a game engine, you're going DirectX. If you're going to Maya or other programs for post-rendering, you do OpenGL, but I like to stick with DirectX for now. A lot of this has to do with the green channel in the normal maps that we create. So for instance, usually with the normal map, from a difference between, say, DirectX and OpenGL is a inverse of the actual XYZ, or I should say the green channel inside of the normal map. So we're going to leave this to DirectX and hit OK. Immediately you're going to see your mesh pop up in your scene, and you can see here it is, and it looks pretty nice. Now you'll notice that we have this thing called a texture set. Now, I like to think of texture sets as pieces of geometry. So you can see you have this texture set settings. You have something that's like layers like in Photoshop. But you have this texture set settings. And this is where you do a lot of your work before you even start metalling and painting and doing all types of things. So we're going to have to create these sort of what I call helper maps that kind of help the game along. Here you can see the group itself, and I go ahead and turn it on and off. We are good to go. Now I think what I'm going to do, just for the heck of it, is I'm going to demo for you guys if you were to bring in multiple pieces of geometry on this situation. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back into Maya. We're going to play a little hit here. So I'm going to go back into Maya really quick. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and do a little experiment. I'm going to take the high res and put it back, to the background here. We don't need it. I'm going to go back and get that low res again. And again, I will zero out the group that this is in. There we go. All right. And I'm going to take this area here, just the garbage can, and heck, let's grab this. No, let's just grab the garbage can. And I'm going to grab it and say assign new material, and I'm going to go ahead and make it a blend. And for the heck of it, I'll just give it a little bit of color difference. Okay. So these now have two different type of materials. This one has the material that I named Group 1. Actually, you can see how it was named after the material itself, right? And in this case, I will go ahead and call this blend material Group 2. Okay. So again, these two are assigned to Group 1. These two are assigned to the material of Group 2. I'm going to grab all of them again, go File, Export Selection, FBX. The presets should be the same as I've set before. And I'm going to go ahead and do a garbage low res 2-piece. Let's do a 2-piece. Throwaway. Let's call it throwaway. All right, close. All right, now I'm going to go back into Substance Painter. And what's really cool is you can just do new again. It says, do you want to save a project? Just say discard. And we got the same settings as we had set up before. You'll notice my document resolution is set to 2048. We're eventually going to be going up to 4096. The good news is you can go up and down in projections for your final texture. So if you start texturing at a resolution of 2048 by 2048, you can go up to a 4096 at any one time. It'll reproject all of your work, so don't worry about that. So I'm going to go ahead and under the mesh this time and use that garbage throwaway and just see what we get. I want you to see this because you might want to change things up a little bit in the future. So I'm going to hit open. Now you'll see something a little bit different. You see we now have two groups in here, and these were all based on the names of the materials, by the way. So you can see Group 1 was the name of the material, that was the Lambert, and then Group 2 was the name of the blend that I changed to be called Group 2. So it's all based on the shader. You see the UV layout here? Now this is the extra headache that I'm going to have two separate sets of maps per image. So I'll have to create two materials inside of Maya when I eventually bring it into Maya to create my scene. But this is the benefit of this is something like this. For instance, I can turn off Group 1, and let's say I did have geometry underneath here, which you can see I don't have any geometry underneath here. I could paint underneath here because maybe this is an object within a game engine that's going to be dented and kicked around and be dynamic, and I don't want the audience to notice there's a hole. And like I talked about before, backface culling in a game engine, and even what we see here in Substance Painter, if you were in a game engine, you would see this anomaly, which means there's no backfacing. So what that does is it kind of makes it weird and ghostly and transparent in areas that are the inverse of the normal direction. And we talked a lot about normal sticking out, but having your object be both airtight and you're not having any holes in your scene, because if you have holes, you get stuff like this. So this is kind of nice. I can go ahead and turn this off and go to group 1. Now I have this by itself. I can paint underneath the actual garbage bin if I need to, but I will either have to combine all my maps together or have two separate materials for these two things, which is kind of sucks in a certain degree. And again, you can rename these. So I can rename this like, this is like let's say ground plane and wreck. And then this guy right here, this is just our garbage bin. So I'll go ahead and call this garbage bin. So what I would like to say is keep in mind that a texture set is quote unquote a piece of geometry. That's what it sounds kind of confusing. You would go texture set, and yes, it has to do with sets of textures. But kind of think of things simplistically with the idea that the texture set is an actual mesh piece, okay? Right? So you can see the UVs are different, but they don't lay on top of each other. So again, now that you've seen this, I'm going to go ahead and stop this video, and in the next video we're going to basically start from scratch again in regards to building our Substance Painter scene with our original low-res mesh that we created. But I wanted you just to see this, just so you can get a taste of the different options you have in Substance Painter.